Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to our week 6 Zoom room. Coming to you here, Dr. Nicholas here, coming to you here from what was earlier today sunny South Florida. I'm actually on my back, sort of my back porch under my tiki hut that I am blessed to have, and I'm just happy to be here. It's nice and warm. Although the sun has gone behind some clouds, nevertheless, it's warm and it's not raining right now. In any event, I will be protected by my trusty tiki hut that I'm sitting under while we have our final Zoom room in industrial and organizational psychology. This is week 6, our final Zoom room. We're wrapping up the class tonight. This is Sunday, the final day of our work week, our school week, if you will. And you have just today to get all your assignments in. Everyone has done actually a very nice job in this class. This is probably, I've been with Central Christian College now a little over 2 years. I'm very blessed and happy. I have no idea how much I love working with the students and staff members at Central Christian. It's you are, and I've worked with other universities, so you are in good hands, if you will, as students. So you can trust that. Anyway, you have done probably as well as any group I have ever had in terms of academically progressing and uh, grade wise. This group has done very well. You all are to be commended and should be very happy and pleased with your efforts as you move forward in your academic career and your professional career. So, and that's one of the great things about teaching organizational psychology is that it's great academically and great from a real world standpoint. So I want to get into managing change a little bit. We talked this week about the sacred cow and the sacred meeting and the sacred paperwork and sacred deadlines. You know, sacred cow is a term that came out some time ago, and it really um, is probably the leading term, and it implies that there are some things in an organization that you just can't touch. You can't even talk about. It's always been done that way, and it's not something that is up for discussion in terms of making a change. The term, of course, comes from the Hindu religion, where you can't touch cows, you can't, or any animal for that matter, that because you would treat them just as you would a human being, their belief being in reincarnation. So they believe that that may be the spirit of a loved one that has now gone in the cow. Certainly not our Christian beliefs, but there are probably close to 1 billion people who are Hindus. So certainly want to honor and respect their beliefs as well. Anyway, from our in terms of our organizational standpoint, um, this gets into managing change. One of the comments I made to one of you, it might have been Donnell, that to actually take this to your leadership in your organization, or to reflect on it as in your leadership role, perhaps. I'm not sure where you all are in your organizations, be it church or in a workplace or nonprofit organization, whatever it may be, volunteer, whatever it may be. You can actually, this is a little tangible to go in and say, let's take a look at our processes here. We're doing okay, but let's make sure that we are doing the best that we can. Are there any things here that we need to address? And then you can sort of discuss what a sacred cow is, and sacred meeting, and sacred paperwork. So that's something you can actually do and take with you. So, and that gets into managing change, because again, change is important. I like to use the word improvement more so than change, because change can be good or bad. We talk about change agents and things such as that. Um, but managing change is an important part of organizational development. So we talked about the sacred paperwork and meetings. I'll mention, as I did in the course room, along with sacred cows, there are sacred meetings. People have to have a support staff meeting every Tuesday at 9 o'clock, no matter what. And a lot of times meetings are wasted. And I am of the position that while this is true, and many people at least, think that meetings are a big waste of time and we shouldn't have them. I think that we should just restructure them. I mentioned at least to at least one of you, maybe more. There's a great book by Patrick Lencioni called Death by Meeting. And in that, he talks about meetings should be, less mundane and more dramatic. Should be some conflict, and people should speak up in meetings in order to make it worthwhile for everyone to be there. So that's important as we look at meetings, or sacred meetings, if you will. And maybe some meetings aren't important. You need to put that on the table. But I think if meetings are run more effectively and efficiently, they won't last as long, and people will leave rather than drained. They will leave recharged with a sort of new marching orders that they can take back to their division or their team or their department to continue to make improvements. So that's part of managing change. There's a great book that I highly recommend if you enjoy organizational psychology and industrial and organizational psychology. It's a very easy read. It's written by Dr. Spencer Johnson. It's a very popular book. Perhaps you've heard of it. It's called Who Moved My Cheese? And in that book, you can read it in an afternoon. So in some cases maybe an hour. I've read the book many times. I've actually also have it on a CD that I play in my car sometimes. It's just read verbatim. And it talks about people's resistance to change. All of us have a resistance to change, some more than others. And in the book, Dr. Johnson explains the ways that our personality is, or the way we approach change, if you will, impacts how we deal with it. And there are effective ways to deal with change, and there are ineffective ways to deal with change. And he has little characters. It's a fable. It's actually just a really fun story to read. And but knowing that will help you as you move on personally, as well as you help others deal with change. From an organizational standpoint, change needs to be planned. Well, it should be planned. Oftentimes it's not. Oftentimes, as we saw with the Vroom-Yetton model also, sometimes people just make a decision, leaders just make a decision that they're going to change something without getting input from their subordinates, which in many times is a problem. Even if it's a good change, and everyone at the leadership table would think it's a good change, if you don't have the input from your subordinates, you can meet resistance. And you don't want resistance, you want buy-in. Now, oftentimes people confuse what it means to get input from your associates or from your subordinates, getting input compared to allowing shared decision making. Ultimately, someone or some group has to make the decision. Sometimes it is not what the subordinates or the associates want. Now, if you actually are just giving them lip service by listening to them for a short period of time, and you don't really, or the leadership team doesn't evaluate or consider the suggestions from the associates, that's a problematic, and it'll come through. It'll be seen in the organization. But if you actually do listen and consider and evaluate what the associates think about certain changes, even if you don't come and agree with them, they will know that they were listened to. Sometimes they may influence a change. Sometimes, if we looked at in other cases, and in this class and some of the other classes that you've taken, that sometimes they have a better idea of what's going on. Sometimes, they're sort of the basketball players on the court, and you're the coach on the side as leaders, or maybe you're the players on the floor, if you will. You have to be the one who executes the change or the play, and the coach can give you ideas. But when you get down there and the other team has their own ideas as well, that's why it's important to really get the input of the associates in many cases, not every case, but in many cases, as we saw from the room-yet model. Sometimes an autocratic decision is the best approach. Autocratic being, just the person or the team at the top makes that decision. But when you do implement change, you have to realize that it's not going to be easy for the organization, for the employees, for the associates, or even for the clients and other stakeholders. So you have to plan it out. You have to present it. You have to present, well, I suggest, and I've seen this firsthand, it really helps to present, if it is an autocratic, or if it's autocratic or not autocratic, you present what was done that has led up to the change and why it is that you arrived at this particular change. If not, it's you expose yourself. Leaders expose themselves to a lot of chatting with employees, saying this isn't right. I don't know why they thought to do it this way. Why didn't they ask us? Even if you did, that you expose yourself to those problems. So if you lead up to, we had to make a change because of this issue. We knew that we had to stop doing this and we had to get closer to doing something that looked like this. This is the approach we took to figure out how we're going to stop this, the thing that's not working, and get closer to what is working. We gathered information from our clients. We gathered information from our team. We gathered information from scholarly resources. We looked at what other companies have done. Based on that, and compared to what we all have, we considered what Team A said. We considered what Team B said, and we came to this decision. This decision is what we're going to go with. Make no mistake about it. Having said that, while we go with this is our final decision, we are continually, as always, making improvements and changes and improvements, I should say, to all of our organizational procedures, including this one. So this is what, we changed from where we were over here to going over here. We'll continue to make improvements, and we appreciate your input. Now, that is not going to solve all your problems, but it will minimize some of the problems because you showed what you did to arrive at the decision and the measures you're taking to approach that and the steps you're taking. So you have to let go of or unfreeze what was not working, put something into place and let that gel, if you will, or they call freeze, and then move on again, and then readdress as necessary. Okay, and I love this slide because employee acceptance of change is impacted a lot by the reason behind the change. Why is it now, for instance, in many schools in South Florida, they are locking the front door? Now, most of the people who work there are in favor of that change. Some of the parents who like to come in to volunteer are not in favor of that change. But because of what happened recently at a South Florida high school, Douglas High School, their schools are looking for ways to keep their campuses safer and make their employees feel safer. And there's going to be a lot more changes coming. I'm sure of it. I'm obviously connected in a big way there. But understanding we are doing this for the safety of the children, students, and the staff. So, okay, I can live with that. It's very inconvenient to have the front door locked and someone has to knock on the door. Someone from inside has to get up and sort of check that person out before they let them in. But we understand that this is for a legitimate reason. Personalities come into play a fair amount when you're talking about change. Who is going to explain the change? Why is the change made? In a perfect world, everybody in an organization gets along very well with each other, but we all know that the reality of it is that there are some people at the top and otherwise who are more popular than others, who employees will take news from a little bit better than some others. So it's important that that is articulated and that the sort of more popular people are included in the delivery and explanation of the change, as well as to know that they are on board with it. Yeah, this slide, implementing change is important. Like, it's one thing to have this plan, but to actually change habits and change behaviors is not as easy as you might think. So some training is needed. If you've been doing something a certain way for a period of time, in some cases years. Hey, Donnell, how are you? I don't see you. Do I hear you? Okay. Let me see. All right, Don. I'm gonna keep. Yeah, I'm mute you here. Donnell, you got your mic muted. You want to unmute your mic? Maybe I need to do it. There we go. Donnell, can you hear me? Okay. I was just talking about change. I'm going to go ahead and Donnell, I'm glad you're here. I was just talking about when an organization goes through a change, that training is needed. People need to have their voices heard, even throughout the whole process. So that's important. It's an important part of change. I'm glad you're here. We talked a good deal in this course about organizational culture and the importance of establishing a strong organizational culture. And that's as important as that is. It's not always easy, and it's not always easy to explain. It's not always easy to define. It isn't like something as tangible as painting the building a different color or painting the inside a different color, although that can be part of it. It's a matter ultimately of building functional relationships. At the very heart of organizational culture is the relationships that are shared by everyone there, the associates, the managers, the leaders, the owners, stakeholders, the shareholders in some cases, and the clients or customers as well. Organizational culture is built by, I should say is built with a foundation of trust. That is the absolute foundation. If you don't establish trust, everything else you do is going to falter. If you picture it like building a house, if you don't have a solid foundation, if you don't have concrete in embedded in there in the ground, and going beneath the surface, if you put strong bricks, on a wall just sitting on a lawn, it's going to fall over. The same is true with an organizational culture where trust is that foundation. Once trust is established, then you can go ahead and start building other procedures and relationships and initiatives and goals and sharing goals and mission statements and things such as that. Once trust is established, you can have employee buy-in to help develop the mission statement of an organization. A mission statement I'm a firm believer, and others have different opinions, but others share my opinion, that a mission statement should be developed by a team of people, and it should be shared, and it should be explained, and there should be buy-in to the mission statement and the mission of an organization. Once trust is established, you have a better chance to do that. And reevaluating the mission statement and reevaluating the company's mission is also much easier, or you're able to do it with a foundation of trust. So that cannot be overstated. So one before I go on to the next presentation or the next part of this presentation, I do want to point out that if you are in an organization that does not have a strong culture, that does not have a functional culture, you can uh, rebuild that culture. You can make that culture better. It takes a lot of work, but here's the thing: maintaining an organizational culture requires work as well. It's not something that you can set in motion and it just goes on and takes a life of its own. Obviously, it's easier once you have a good culture to keep it and maintain it, but it does not perpetuate itself. So if you want to reestablish a culture, I've been in organizations that have done this. Of course, I love doing these things, so it was actually kind of fun for me. Um, but and especially the end result, but it can be done. So I just want to talk about the Broom Yet model. But I want to go to the next part of the presentation um, because this is a big deal. The stress management, and we had a great discussion this week about the responsibility of the organization to help employees, their associates, manage stress. And I mean, there is a whole there's we could spend a year talking about this. Uh, Most of you did agree, as do many experts, and in fact, most experts do agree that an organization does have an obligation to have a culture and a workforce and a work setting that is not unduly stressful to the employees. Listen, there's always going to be stress. We always have stress. The only people who don't have stress are dead. Um, there are stressors outside, uh, you know, our home. There's stressors inside our home. There's stressors outside of work. There are stressors inside of work. So there's always going to be some stress, even if it's eustress, which we will get into maybe in a little bit more. Um, but when we are overloaded with stress, that is not healthy for the employees. And I will go on record as saying the organization has some obligation to create a work uh, place that is not unduly overburdened with stress for the employees. Um, Much like, and I mentioned this in one of my responses, the organization by law must not put employees in harm's way. In other words, they cannot ask an employee to work with dangerous chemicals, unless that's part of the job, and then in which case the employer must provide protective clothing and mask and oxygen and things such as that. Um, must also train them. And there's no limit to the examples. I can think of, for instance, pest control companies that hire people to go out and spray chemicals and around people's homes and offices and to keep roaches and ants and things like that away. Well, those chemicals, some are not very harmful at all to human beings, and some are, depending on various factors. And you can't just send someone out there, and put them in harm's way. Uh, that's illegal. Same, you can't ask people to walk across a dangerous a floor that's just been waxed or mopped. You got to put signs up, and you can't ask employees to um, uh, work in hazardous weather in many cases if there's lightning or depending on the job, of course. You can't ask. I think of these guys. You don't see them much anymore. The telephone. Because we don't have those kind of wires, but you see a lot of used to see a lot of telephone linemen. They have to climb the poles to fix the lines for telephones, or electricians and whatnot. Now you see sometimes the guys going up in the cranes. You can't have them go up there without proper training and proper equipment and proper safety equipment. Likewise, although it's there's no laws that I can think of off the top of my head. But there are contracts that say you can't create a hostile working environment. There's anyone with a union, that can be a grievance. That's one of the things that employees can file a grievance with their union about their leadership and their bosses, because they are creating a hostile working environment. That can be done through many different ways. Yelling, embarrassing, employees, intimidating employees, threatening employees, uh, or employees not getting along and yelling at each other. That creates what we call a hostile working environment, and every union that I've ever known of will not stand for that. Now, if you're working in a place that doesn't have a union, I don't know that there are statutes, at least in Florida, that would protect that. Especially Florida, like most states, are right to work states. So unless you have a contract of some sort with a union or some other professional contract, you don't really, as a worker, have a lot of support from anyone. So, so I just make that generalization between, physical safety as well as emotional or mental health safety that we deal with. There's a term that organizational psychologists use. It's called emotional labor. This refers to what we deal with, and oftentimes it's more taxing and draining than physical labor. From physical labor, you might think about a guy unloading a tractor trailer with a bunch of boxes of shoes or something like that, or you might think about a person digging a ditch, or you might think about construction workers. Those there's physical labor with that, and at the end of the day, people are typically physically tired from those jobs. On the other hand, professional jobs or other jobs have emotional labor. I think the best example is a customer service representative. And oftentimes, on the phone or in person, more oftentimes than not, it's on the phone now. What do they do all day? They handle customer complaints. They see customers who are not happy by and large. Sometimes customers can be very nasty and unreasonable and make demands that, are not okay. And they blame the customer service rep for everything. So, and the customer service rep's job is to calm that person down, solve their problem, but they can't give them everything that they want if the customer is making an unrealistic or unreasonable demand. For example, they want to return a household appliance, let's say a blender, because it doesn't work anymore, and the blender is like 12 years old and the warranty ran out 5 years, or after 5 years or whatever, and they that people come in with those kind of complaints, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with those, and the customer service rep cannot replace the blender because that's not the deal. That was not the agreement, and the customer can sometimes become unreasonable and get loud and yell and call the customer service rep names. Sometimes you've heard these stories, I'm sure, but the customer service rep cannot return those slurs, and nor should they. But that weighs on us. We have to continue to smile, and the customer service rep has to continue to smile and everything. So that, at the end of the day, you're exhausted from that. And that's just one example. You could think of 100 other examples: salespeople, waitresses, managers, even dealing with their subordinates and what have you. So, and being overworked also, we see that a lot now. We didn't see that 15, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, but now employers are really asking a lot of their employees, many different areas. So that also adds to the emotional labor. Most employees go in wanting to do a good job, and when they have so many things to accomplish within a given period of time, let's say the day, and they don't accomplish everything, they typically feel upset by that. They feel sad by that. They feel unaccomplished by that. But the fact of the matter is, in some cases, it was an impossible task. But the employer, knows, for example, they got as much out of the employees as they possibly could, or that's the thinking. That's not really the case. So that also adds to the emotional labor. So I think we had good conversations about the obligation of the employer or association to help the employees manage their stress. Also, something that we hit on a fair amount, but not as much, was the employee's obligation to go in and do the best that he or she can for his or her organization. some of the real world examples that we see: employees coming in, with a hangover after going out drinking the night before, and so they're not at their best. That's a complaint from some managers who work with younger people and older people as well. Not keeping yourself in physical shape. Like you employees have to, because you're at your best when you're in good physical shape. Keeping yourself mentally sharp as well, getting a good night's sleep, getting adequate nutrition, because while the employer has an obligation to the employee also has an obligation to that employer. When they applied for the job, they in essence agreed to do their very best, and an employee cannot do his or her best if they haven't had adequate sleep. Now, sometimes you don't sleep well. That's different. But if you've been up all night running around, partying, or even working a second job, or not getting adequate nutrition, or not taking your medication, or drinking too much, even if you're not drunk, drinking too much the evening before, you're not at your best the next day. So I think this is a good place. We're going to end this discussion today. Kind of in some ways, kind of where we came in. The first week we talked about a good working definition of industrial and organizational psychology is we look at how an organization's practices, policies, and procedures impact the associates, as well as how the associates' mental health and behavior and attitudes impact the organization. So this kind of brings it full circle in that each has a responsibility to the other. So with that, I'm going to end the discussion. For those of you who, Donnell, you will get your points for being here. For those of you who tune into the recording, I'll post the recording as soon as I possibly can. Rather than a Bible verse, I'm going to ask you where I conducted this Zoom room, where I actually physically was, and you can say that I was under my tiki hut enjoying the weather of South Florida, and that I am keeping each of you in prayer. So with that, we're going to go ahead and end this. Donnell, you've been doing a wonderful job. This is, I think, the second time we've been together. So I most definitely appreciate the fact that you tuned in here and were able to be part of this today. So with that, we're going to say so long, and I hope to see you all again in the class real soon. Oops, Donnell, I got something here for you. Okay, good.